how to partner with energy. Stop measuring your strength by how much shit you can tolerate. Josie Rosario. My name is Damon Brown, and I am a napper. It started when I finished grad school and became a full-time freelance journalist. It is an independent hustle, pitching publications and offering your services. You can work from wherever you want. I like that part. Something romantic about being able to turn in articles from New Orleans one day, then from Tokyo the next day, with my editors being none the wiser. Sure, I was too broke to travel, but I liked to plan. It would pay off later when I did start world traveling, and much later when I became a stay-at-home dad. The naps, though. I'm a focused guy, so once I got into my flow, it wouldn't be unusual for me to stay up all night writing and unplug the phone from the wall. As I said, this was a while ago, to go undistracted. I can lean into my biggest resource, focus. Then I go to rest, often with a strong midday siesta. On his podcast, Tim Ferriss once talked about a legendary martial arts champ who would take a nap on the sidelines, snoring and all, and up until right before his fight. Then he'd wake up early, completely alert, and win the match. I felt seen. But for years, I didn't tell anyone about my daily naps. I wouldn't tell my in-laws, as their tough immigrant culture didn't accept young adults taking siestas. I wouldn't tell my fellow freelancers, as it felt duplicitous to strategize about how to get above the poverty line in one breath and then talk about how refreshed I felt after spending the afternoon virtually comatose in the next breath. And I definitely wouldn't tell anyone who didn't believe working from home was an actual job. This was before WFH, flex days, and the like became fashionable. So I come up with excuses as to why I didn't answer the phone, had to disappear midday, or just wasn't available sometimes. I knew, though, that napping was an essential part of my energy cycle. My thoughts were clearest mid-afternoon, post-nap, and on well into the night. When I finally moved to New Orleans, I'd wake up mid-morning, nap in the afternoon, and then write my first major book from late afternoon until around midnight. Afterwards, I'd often grab a nightcap with my fellow creative friends in or around the quarter. I did that for a year. My book manuscript was done shortly after. I came out about my napping quite a few years back, even calling it essential in my best-selling book, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. Now colleagues are pleasantly surprised when they listen to their body, actually stop for a moment, and wake up more powerful than before. Today, entire freaking studies are dedicated to napping. The British Medical Journal, the University of Warwick, and other medical experts found that sleep deprivation, less than 6 hours a night, can lead to increased heart disease, depression, and other undesired outcomes. A short, hour or less nap can help counteract these effects. I had the wisdom to keep my napping habit for decades. I just wish I was wise enough to listen to myself more and let go of the shame. I'm sure I would have slept a lot sounder. Game plan for your energy. Number 1, always have a strategy. Number 2, choose your battles wisely. Number 3, use no as a complete sentence. How to strengthen your energy. Number 1, journaling, meditate, or otherwise reflect on your actions. Number 2, cultivate moments of silence without tech to pay attention to your thoughts. Number 3, let go of habits that no longer serve you physically, mentally, or emotionally. Boundaries for your energy. Number 1, recognize leaks in your energy. Number 2, don't mistake stillness for death. And number 3, know when to let go of an intention. Essentialism author Greg McKeown says the origin of the word priority is Greek for first or foremost. There cannot be multiple priorities. There can be primary and secondary, but saying you have a dozen priorities is like saying you're going in a dozen directions. It isn't possible. It is possible to overanalyze every move you make to the point where you either give up or stop caring out of pure exhaustion. We assume that more choices empower us. In reality, each decision takes more energy away, and that can eventually create inertia. It's how you slip into autopilot, perhaps waiting for something big to happen so that you can get energized again to take the wheel. The Paradox of Choice author Barry Schwartz calls this decision fatigue. In his popular TED Talk, he breaks down the 3 effects of having, or more accurately, giving ourselves too many options. First, we tend to procrastinate decisions when the number of choices overwhelm us. And, I would add, the more important the decision, the more likely we are to delay it. Second, we worry about opportunity cost. We're interested in one action, but afraid that we'll miss something else that we can't do as a result. In more modern terms, we call this FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Our ever-connected, social media power world is ripe with FOMO opportunities. Energy-conscious folks have come up with one of my personal favorite acronyms, JOMO, or the joy of missing out. Lashley Schwartz says that we have an escalation of expectations. We made a decision and sacrificed all these other opportunities, so the one we choose better damn be good. Schwartz points out that we have more choices than ever, from what ketchup to eat to which types of jeans to buy. That paralysis of analysis has leaked into our personal and professional lives, making us too tired to make the big decisions because we've been, consciously or not, making dozens of little decisions every day. Like many entrepreneurs and creatives, I hate saying no. Why? Unlike scientists and other logic-driven people, we don't see the downside. We usually see the possibility. Unfortunately, saying yes to everything means eventually saying no to other things. This is one of the few times when the scarcity mindset actually comes in handy. You can't just make more time, nor can you just make more energy. They will come from something else. You may as well make it a conscious process. Opportunities are just obligations wearing an appealing mask, Paul Jarvis says in The Company of One. There might have been a positive outcome to seizing them, but they always come at a cost in terms of time, attention, or resources. No matter how hard you try, you cannot scale the amount of time in your day. And since you cannot somehow buy more hours, you need to find ways to use those hours better. Saying no is the closest thing we've got to creating energy. We know that taking on less will automatically increase our power in what we do choose. And yet we don't say it. In my research, we claim to avoid saying no for 3 reasons. Number 1, we don't want to disappoint others. Number 2, we don't want others to fail without our help. And number 3, we don't want to miss an opportunity. In reality, it rarely has to do with other people. It has to do with our fear of being free. Without a nonstop agenda, we can feel rudderless and out to sea. We're in the middle of pandemic time. Large swaths of Americans have more time than ever before. Same could be said for energy. But we can't escape into social gatherings. We can't hop onto a plane to change the scenery, and most of us can't dive into our work in the same way. You may have complained about your work commute, doing business trips, or going to a wedding or funeral you would rather avoid. These basic rituals also filled up your day. They created a rhythm, one you don't have anymore. We're all staring into the void. The more accustomed you are to solving problems, to getting things done, to having a routine, the harder it will be for you right now because none of that is possible right now. University of Minnesota Professor Emeritus of Social Sciences Pauline Boss, PhD, recently said in an interview. She says our American culture is very solution-oriented, which is a good way of thinking for many things. It's partially responsible for getting the man on the moon and a rover on Mars, and all those things we've done in this country that are wonderful. But it's a very destructive way of thinking when you're faced with a problem that has no solution, at least for a little while. What is extraordinary about this mass experience is how quickly it exposed our long-standing silent pact. Our perceived productivity is directly tied to our self-worth. If we aren't busy, then we feel lost. And if other people aren't happy with their station in life, then they don't have the right to rest. My 2016 book, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, was, in part, a reaction to Silicon Valley productivity shaming. You can do good work, serve your customers, and have a life. I saw lots of young men and women buy into that myth that your startup had to be your entire life, and then I saw them burn themselves out into oblivion. Now we've moved on to judging others on productivity to judging others on how they are productive. Right before the pandemic, there were a slew of thought leaders arguing that everyone should wake up at 4 a.m. Apple CEO Tim Cook does it. So does the SEAL team leader who killed Osama bin Laden. Unsurprisingly, I didn't find one article that gave scientific evidence as to why. At least naps have some evidence. I got up at 3:15 a.m. every morning for 2 years to run my 2 startups, because I was the primary caretaker of my baby. I still wouldn't argue anyone else should do the same. Seth Godin says culture simply means, quote, "This is how we do things here, and what changes the culture is each of us, what we expect and how we expect things to go." It doesn't have to make sense. It is just what we decide to believe. That means we can change our minds too, beginning on an individual level. There are so many things that capitalism has stolen, and one of them is our dream space, which is where our power lies, says the Nap Ministry founder Tricia Hersey. You don't have to work like a dog to get to the end result. You should work towards your calling, but you can work within alignment. You can be balanced. When you're resting and sleeping, you get some of your best ideas for the next move you have to make. Energy-full and energy-challenged people alike can have the same three difficulties. Number 1, mistaking stillness for death. Number 2, recognizing leaks in their energy. And number 3, knowing when to let go of an intention. Pivot author Jenny Blake talks about being in a goo state, GOO, the liminal, unclear moment between finishing one action and taking another one. In my bite-sized entrepreneur framework, it is the renewing part of the renewing, pursuing, and doing creative cycle, as discussed in the agility section. On our podcast, Blake and spiritualist Penny Pierce describe the goo state. They say that Penny equates the liminal space to the time when the caterpillar has created and entered the cocoon, but has not transitioned into a butterfly. It is the space in which we are given the chance to rest, reset, and recharge before moving into the next phase. It sounds lovely when you put it that way, so why do we want to rush the process? I say, but to the caterpillar, stillness is death. Just as losing our inefficient routines, dissolving the toxic relationship, sapping our energy, and unloading our overbooked schedule feels like a loss of our identities. This goo state, this necessary pause, helps us recognize the leaks in our energy. In my coaching, I found we usually waste our energy putting the abundance we have, or the little we've got, into areas in which we have no influence. We waste our energy trying to gain validation for our work. Our work begins with putting your trust in your instinct. This particular thing needs to be given to the world, and I'm in the position to offer it. And then putting your trust into your audience. And those whom I want to serve will show up. Doubt in what we instinctively know needs to be given to the world stops us from starting. Doubt in the audience actually showing up keeps us from finishing. And then we begin to wiggle, evade, or otherwise drop our best intentions. We try to find ways to secure the win and guarantee our work will be accepted. It means wanting that extra degree or certification to have others take us more seriously when we really want to validate ourselves. Waiting for a major music contract before we take song recording seriously, we could have been building an audience all along. Or investing money in fancy business cards and other paraphernalia when we haven't sold our first item yet. We're effectively turning an inside job into an outside job, and we're scattering energy all over the place. Our commitment to the process is the only alternative to this lottery mindset of hoping to the good luck of getting picked by the universe, Seth Godin says in The Practice. A lifetime of brainwashing has taught us that work is about measurable results, that failure is fatal, and that we should be sure that the recipe is proven before we begin. And so we begin to bury our dreams. We allow others to live in our head, reminding us that we are imposters with no hope of making an original contribution. This is a danger even when we have monumental success. It may even be worse when we have a significant social impact, as it is harder to tune out the outside voices from our inside instinct. For instance, pop icon Michael Jackson became obsessed with topping his legendary 1983 album Thriller. Keep in mind that Thriller was and is one of the top 20 selling albums of all time. As I share in the Bite-Size or the Ultimate Bite-Size Entrepreneur, his longtime producer Quincy Jones saw him trying to top his record sales, something that was ultimately out of Jackson's control. The problem? Jackson wanted to do it again. According to Jones, he spent the rest of his life, album after album, trying to create something bigger than Thriller. As a result, he never felt quite satisfied. It is an amazing trap. You naturally hit a home run, and the next time you go to bat, you're checking the wind conditions, you're wearing your lucky hat, and you're trying to recreate the previous experience. The rub is that what you did, the success you had, wasn't just based on your actions. It is both timing and inspiration too. The sales success of Thriller cannot be recreated because the whole record industry sold less records, as we would see with Napster and iTunes and Spotify. The needs of the listener change, ironically because of Thriller itself. So doing another Thriller wouldn't recreate the same sea change. And Jackson was arguably in a different place, as he now had ridiculously high expectations of himself and a new set of pressures. I can say that there is something unusual about the air on the mountaintop. I felt lost twice in my life. The year escaping Hurricane Katrina, and the year after selling my second startup, Cuddler. In both cases, my identity as a Crescent City resident and as a co-founder and a home, New Orleans, or with the color community we cultivated, was suddenly gone. It didn't matter if one was by force and the other one was by choice. And while I recognize now that months following Katrina held me in a low-grade PTSD, our sale of cuddlers showed me how much I identified with the 3:15 a.m. business meetings, the constant limelight from the New York Times, the WSJ, and other outlets, and the potential of more growth, more community, and more opportunities. Suddenly, the light switch turned off. I was no longer a founder. I was just a writer. And perhaps I'd never write again. So I began to brainstorm new ideas, things I could spin up quickly. I sewed the physical journal full of them and a bunch of iPhone notes to match. I come up with an idea that I knew would be the next big hit. Share it with my confidants, buy the domain name, and so on. Then I'd lose interest. I'd do everything but complete the mock-up version so I could actually see if it was worth going deeper on. And then I'd do it again and again. This went on for weeks. One day, a friend visited me and we caught up over a long coffee. I breathlessly talked about the cuddler experience, the acquisition, and lots of inside baseball that would eventually be shared in some way. Enough of that, I seemed to say. As I have this new idea that will make an even bigger impact, I'm ready to get back in the game. It was late fall, and Cuddler had just sold the previous summer. I spent almost 2 years waking up at 3:15 a.m. every morning to found and lead my two companies, So Quotable and Cuddler, while being a stay-at-home dad and active journalist. I was still primary caretaker of my first son, Alec, and now 2 years old. And I just found out that we had another son on the way. How about this? My friend said, pausing me after I shared my new idea. What if your family is your startup right now? Stop me in my tracks. My family is, and was, my primary throughout. But I also needed something more. What if this was a season to be still? Isn't that how So Quotable came about? Or when I connected with the two co-founders, how I saw the potential in Cuddler? It was energy waiting for the best opportunity, not energy scattered trying to make an opportunity. It was trust. Come to find out, Inc. magazine was looking for a columnist. It became a cathartic way to process my experience and pass along any lessons I learned in this whirlwind journey. The column eventually became my self-published bestseller, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. I was now a touring public speaker. And everything happened that brought me here to you right now. But first, I had to let go of my win, the past, and sit still enough to reassess where I should put my energy, the future. I had to stop chasing success. After her book sold an unexpected 10 million copies, Eat, Pray, Love author Elizabeth Gilbert found herself famous, financially secure, and, in her words, stuck. She explained it beautifully in her 2014 TED Talk. She says, for most of your life, you live out your existence here in the middle of the chain of human experience, where everything is normal and reassuring and regular. But failure catapults you abruptly way over here into the blinding darkness of disappointment. Success catapults you just as abruptly, but just as far away over here into the equally blinding glare of fame and recognition and praise. One of these fates is objectively seen in the world as bad, and the other one is objectively seen in the world as good. But your subconscious is completely incapable of discerning the difference between bad and good. The only thing it is capable of feeling is absolute value of this emotional equation, the exact distance that you have been flung from yourself. And there's a real equal danger in both cases of getting lost out there in the hinterlands of the psyche. But in both cases, it turns out that there is also the same remedy for self-restoration. And it is that you have to find your way back home again as swiftly and smoothly as you can. And if you're wondering where your home is, here's a hint. Your home is wherever in this world you love more than you love yourself. So that might be creativity, it might be family, it might be invention, adventure, faith, service, it might be raising corgis, I don't know. But your home is your thing in which you can dedicate your energies with such singular devotion that the ultimate results become inconsequential. Being famous or prolific won't help you succeed again. What matters is the work and your intention. Is your product or service being done with the audience at the forefront? Are you contributing something more to the cultural conversation? Ego-driven enterprises rarely raise as high as purely motivated work, and we are in the most danger of doing the former after a big win. At some point, the professional has to bring home the fish. That's the fuel that permits the professional to show up every day. But the catch is a side effect of the practice itself. Get the practice right, and your commitment will open the door to the market to engage with your work. Seth Godin says in the practice, you might seek a shortcut, a hustle, a way to somehow cajole the fish onto the hook. But if it distracts you from the process, your art will suffer. Better to set aside judging yourself until after you've committed to the practice and done the work. We also waste energy trying to change someone's mind. It is more effective to change by example rather than argument. In coaching, they say that you can't want your client's success more than they do. A hallmark of my boutique coaching practice is that I'm super selective of the people in which I work with. I learned early on the cost of taking a client because they had the money but didn't currently have the mindset to improve themselves. In one instance, a referral said they wanted to leave their corporate position and launch their own startup. Great, I thought. But then they explained that they were determined to quit their day job as soon as possible, had no entrepreneurship experience, and had no interest in taking on a co-founder because, after I asked a few questions, they admitted that they wanted as much control as possible. Now, let's briefly break down all the alarms that went off. You don't quit your day job based on the promise of potential income. Potential doesn't pay the rent. You cannot understand being a founder until you've become one. It's like imagining being a parent when you don't have any kids, or thinking what it's like to visit Japan if you've never set foot in Asia. And we co-found companies because it is often too intense to go about it alone. And, as was this potential client's case, you need other people to balance your own skills or compensate for all you don't know. In the case of my most notable startup, Cuddler, it had 3 co-founders, Charlie Williams as a programming veteran and initial founder, Jeff Kulak as a veteran artist, and me as a media and tech veteran, specifically tech culture. I was the sole founder of my first startup, So Quotable, but I am far from an expert programmer and couldn't draw my way out of a shootout. Our app launched to 100,000 users in the first week, 250,000 at our peak, and was acquired in a cash deal less than a year after it started. A balanced team doesn't guarantee success, but not having one will almost always guarantee failure. As gently as possible, I explained all this to the client. They directly rejected each and every insight. This was different, they said. They had an extraordinary idea, and the market would carry them where they needed to go, they said. Can I help them? Not at this point, I say, but good luck on your journey. Now, at the time, my bank account wanted to give a very different answer. And then I let them go. Sometimes you need to let go when other people won't let go. Sometimes you have to protect your own energy leaks when other people won't protect their own. Several months later, they emailed me out of the blue. They left their job, they built their startup, and to paraphrase the movie Field of Dreams, the people didn't come. Could I help? I could not. As the Greek Stoic Epictetus said, for it is impossible for a man to begin to learn what he is, a conceit that he already knows. This isn't a slam on the potential client, and I did and do wish them the best. I also know that working with them would be a waste of my energy. They're not in a place to receive what I am serving. We all do better when we give sunshine to the plants that are open. We waste energy building things that aren't built to last. Something isn't worth the effort if we have to prop it up 24/7. It reminds me of those old Hollywood sets of New York, San Francisco, or a random Western ghost town. You may be able to fool some of the folks into thinking that they've been magically transported to Manhattan, but the people are always smarter than we think. And it isn't a passive act. We have to maintain that facade. Think about the one-hit wonder who engineers their entire career to have a big single, a best-selling book, or a remarkable fame. The problem, of course, is that these rewards are not permanent, but fleeting. There will always be a next week's Billboard chart, tomorrow's New York Times bestsellers list, or the up-and-coming starlet to take your place. Your audience doesn't want your authentic voice, Seth Godin says. They want your consistent voice. Your job is to keep showing up, and that's a lot easier if you are true to your own message from the start. Being who we are is the ultimate energy source. When people ask me how creators like myself can be so prolific, I say it is easier when it comes from the same center. And that center is me being myself. There is no facade. And when people like my work, as a coach, as a keynoter, as an author, then they recognize and trust that consistency across the board and support my work financially across all the platforms. It also means it requires less effort to deliver consistently. People can copy skills, expertise, and knowledge, which are all replicable with enough time and effort, Paul Jarvis says in Company of One. What is not replicable is who you truly are, your style, your personality, your sense of activism, and your unique way of finding creative solutions to complicated problems. So lean on that in your work, selling your way of thinking as much as you would a commodity. Polarization can shorten the sales cycle because it forces customers into a quicker binary choice to decidedly say yes or no. After all, it's hard to make money from maybes. The energy leaks to get outside validation from our work, to change someone's mind, or to build just for the moment all come from the same place. Our urges stem from anxiety. I don't mean the clinical variety. People I care about have generalized anxiety. It is not a condition to be taken lightly. What I'm talking about is the anxiety of self. We're not sure if we're showing up right. And right often means doing what we think we need to do to guarantee that we will be successful. But, of course, there is no guarantee. We persist in looking for it anyway. To stay in the present moment takes concentration. Worries and anxiety about the future are always there, ready to take us away. Thich Nhat Hanh says, we can see them, acknowledge them, and use our concentration to return to the present moment. When we have that concentration, we have a lot of energy. We won't get carried away by visions of past suffering or fears about the future. We dwell stably in the present moment so that we can get in touch with the wonders of life and generate joy and happiness. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, the pandemic has cut the length of business meetings 20%. In other words, a 2-hour in-person meeting is now just over an hour and a half. A full-day meeting can adjourn by mid-afternoon. We've already adjusted to remote calls after several months of off-site virtual meetings, so it's not a matter of so-called Zoom fatigue. What happened? The lockdown introduced a host of new problems requiring unplanned, emergent coordination, much of which could be addressed through impromptu interaction if everyone was in the same office, the report says. With everyone working at home, however, short meetings could serve to quickly communicate new plans, share work that has been accomplished, increase accountability, calibrate priorities, provide social support, and achieve other purposes that are often handled informally in office settings. This unplanned, emergent coordination is why we go to conferences, meet colleagues at coffee houses, and have happy hours with friends. It is the spontaneous exchange of energy and ideas. The energy full and the energy challenge also need to remember that these impromptu opportunities can sap away power from any bigger priority. The energy full can pile on these random interactions, assuming there will be more strength left over to tackle the most important goals, while the energy challenge may believe that the quick, unexpected detour will take less strength than it actually will. Now, with a majority of us working from home, we have to boot up our computer or pick up the phone, schedule these interactions onto a calendar or video conference app, and know that every single moment we spend within a meeting could be spent doing the actual thing we care most about. As a long-time work-from-homer, I always knew to prioritize my physical health and rest, my home environment, and later, my family, as they are constantly right in front of me. Now, once office-bound people realize that they have a choice, too, as to where they're going to put their energy. Lastly, partnering with energy works best when you know when to let go of an intention. Wisdom is knowing when something costs too much compared to what you will get from it. It reminds me of Seth Godin talking about the difference between price and cost, which I highlight in The Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. Price is a simple number. How much money do I need to hand you to get this thing? Cost is what I had to give up to get this. Cost is how much to feed it, take care of it, maintain it, and troubleshoot it. Cost is my lack of focus and my cost of storage. Cost is the externalities, the effluent, the side effects. For the energy rich, a misplaced or misguided intention is dangerous because you could keep going and never truly run out of gas. For the energy challenge, you don't have the energy to waste going in an unintended direction. And why do we have revelations when we are laying down immobile in a hospital bed, or looking into the tear-filled eyes of a loved one in emotional pain, or unexpectedly getting the pink slip from our job? Because, as Gandalf says in the Lord of the Rings movie adaptation, "Thou shalt not pass." It means energy can no longer pass. Sometimes a roadblock is the only way we actually stop to figure out where exactly our energy is going. The key to both the energy rich and energy challenge is to honor the season you're in, pursuing, doing, or renewing. Renewing means you're reflecting on what you've done and what you'd like to do next. Pursuing means strategizing how you'd like to accomplish what you'd like to do next. And finally, doing is the outward manifestation of both. I was and remain a mighty daydreamer. Business consultant and entrepreneur Natalie Nixon says in The Creative Leap. Daydreams are like a magnetic pull for me. What begins as a glance at a small object blurs into the depths of my mind until I pull myself out of my reverie to go back to the matter at hand. And I always feel refreshed when I go back to normal. The reverie serves as a type of marinating time for new ideas. Energy is at its best when it knows where it is going. When put in your best direction, energy puts out multiples and brings back more than what it has left. It creates what economics call a virtuous cycle. It never ends. Understanding your creative power, value, and service is your consistent source, your monk's rope, your allies on this journey. It is your Ouroboros, the mythical snake eating its own tail. It is nourished forever. I say, and bring your worth. Imagine never retiring, not because you need to work to live, but because you live to work. You live to serve. You feed it, and then it feeds you, forever. Your job then isn't to predict the leap to success, nor to wait for success before you begin. Your job is to serve, and in serving, your truth will always come back to you. It is the belief that circumstances can and will change, and that your actions, in part, will help make that happen. It is understanding that the power of your choices is true, and that your actions aren't going into a vacuum. Energy is hope. Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh gives the sublime definition in his book, No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. He says, "When I lived in Vietnam during the war, it was difficult to see our way through the dark and heavy mud. It seemed like the destruction would just go on and on forever. Every day people would ask me if I thought the war would end soon. It was a very difficult question to answer because there was no end in sight. But I knew if I said, I don't know, that would only water their seeds of despair. So when people asked me that question, I replied, everything is impermanent, even war. It will end someday. Knowing that, we could continue to work for peace. And indeed, the war did end."